looks like this.
It's on the very, it's in the very back section.
Yeah,
Behind enrollment. Behind the NASDAQ stuff.
yeah. you've got that.
Yep.
I don't see it.
No, I don't think so.
Which one are you looking at? 37 years of,
No.
No, you don't, actually,
not
it's
that one.
behind.
last page we have is
Nope.
37 years.
I'll give you one.
Yeah, not that one.
I'll send you one.
Okay,
Great.
That's easy.
yeah.
I put extra stuff in mine because I asked, we're playing Stump Glenn here, so. but, No, I.
How we doing?
I can email you. That's easy. That one I got.
Okay. So on retirement, I gather they're every year.
Retirement's really difficult to work with. I mean, it's not really just retirement, it's staff exchange. I mean, as I said before, you have people who are not renewed, you have people who choose to go elsewhere and resign, you have people who retire. Retirements are the ones that you usually think of in terms of a rollover of money, because you generally assume that the person retiring is retiring at a high salary and being replaced by someone at a lower salary, and that's certainly the case generally. As I said, we do try to hire, when we hire, we're trying to hire people who have some experience, so it's not, you're not going from a 30-year experienced person generally to a one-year experienced person. You're probably you're probably trying to hire someone with, a few years of experience behind them, so it's not enormous. But it's still a significant amount of money. The number of retirements per year is unpredictable. People can retire by sending a letter in saying, I'm retiring. We got one today. Person's gonna retire at the end of the year. Didn't know that till today. 6, 8, 9, 10 is probably a reasonable year. Again, that's money that we sometimes need, as I mentioned earlier, when we needed the extra, kindergarten, first grade this year, that's where it came from. I mean, we had a couple more retirements last year than we thought we were gonna have, so we used the money to fill that gap. In a case like the 9C reversion on full-day kindergarten grant, it may be somewhere in there that money comes from. It is, for lack of a better word, a little bit of a cushion towards the unexpected in the next year, because as you can tell from the charts I put together, I've just rolled staff forward. The number of special education aides in this budget is exactly the same for next year as it is for this year. Is that a reasonable expectation? I haven't a clue. It's the only one I got. I just have to say we're gonna have the same number of special education aides next year as this year. We might have fewer, we might have more. And this is my only flexibility against that is the rollover from staff exchange. And also in terms of, the other place where it's shown up in the past is in our budget for substitute teachers. That's an unpredictable line as well. I mean, that's another one I get a report every week on to say, where are we on substitute teachers? Are we gonna make it for the year? We have a $400,000 budget annually for substitute teachers. But if you have a few extra maternity leaves above average, all of a sudden that's a lot of substitute teachers. And again, that's sort of one of those unpredictables. We might find out tomorrow we have another maternity leave coming up. I mean, you never know. So,
There's nothing in particular that distinguishes this year from any other year in terms of turnover or
Retirements?
retirement or anything like that?
based on what we've heard so far, no. I mean, it's not like we have a stack of
And
letters on
within-
our desk that's
within the
larger than
system-
normal.
Within the system, you don't have, I don't know what the average age is of your teachers. You don't have, it's a smooth distribution?
Well, as I said before, we have roughly 50% of our teachers have 10 years experience or less, and 50% don't. So, some fraction of those teachers are, probably over 20 years and are at some point looking for retirement. But you don't have mandatory retirement in the teaching profession. People can stay on as long as they choose to stay on, or leave when they choose to leave. So it's difficult to, look at a chart and say, oh, I think we're gonna have 8 this year. It's more likely, you're talking to the principals, who, do you think anyone might be retiring this year that you know of? Are you hearing any rumors around the water cooler? I mean, that's about the only way you can judge these things. So, I mean, based on what we've seen so far, half a year in, the number of notices that we've gotten for the end of this year is, no different than most years. I would expect us to come in with, 6, 8, 10 retirements, just as a guess.
So the state retirement system is an interesting one, and it tends to encourage people to do their best to get to 30 years of service. And that's because the benefit is an extraordinarily good benefit if you get to 30 years of service and age 65. If you retire early, it's not a very good benefit at all. And in most cases, you should probably take your money when you go. But it's hard to predict. I've got a little experience with retirement projections. The best you can do is look at your demographics over a 10 to 15 year period if you have that much data, and look at the average age, average length of service that people tend to retire at. But the other incentive to stay is that as long as your salary continues to increase, because the benefits calculated on the last 3 or last 5 consecutive years, if your salary is continuing to increase, then the benefit still gets a little better, even if you're at the maximum number of years of service. So it's a system that encourages long tenure.
Oh, good. I mean, then you have the possibility of excellent, experienced teachers. So
Yep.
that's, you want that. But it's nice as a planning tool to know where you are if you're about to replace a lot of expensive
Absolutely.
kindergarten teachers.
Absolutely. No, I think
For
the question's a great question. We would want to know where there are bumps or increases in the number of retirements that we would anticipate.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. There was one, mind how a cost of living increase split works, and they tend to work differently, the one you negotiated this past year for this current year, if I've got that right.
It's for next year.
Yeah,
For,
it's like
sorry, this
16.
past year for the year we are currently working on,
Yeah.
fiscal year 16, is a 1%, 1%, and
Right.
and many of the town union.
No, next year's a 1-1.
It's 1% on July
Next year is a 1-1, not this year.
Yeah, fiscal year 16.
fiscal
Oh,
16.
17,
16.
16.
right.
1% on
The
July
year we're
1.
working on.
Well, you were working on
Right.
16.
It actually depends on the unit, but for teachers, it's 1% on their first day next September, August 30th or whatever. And then an additional 1% on the 92nd day of the year, because that would be halfway through the year. For custodial workers, for instance, it'd be 1% on July 1st, 1% on January 1st. So at the end of a year, their salary will have increased by 2%. The cost to the town during the year is 1.5%, because they'll get a 1% raise for the first half of the year, and an additional 1% raise only for the second half of the year. So the uptick, what it means is that for 17, the costs that you see in here for 16 are basically a 1.5% increase. It's the 1-1 split. I won't be able to use those numbers as a basis for
No, you'll have to
17,
add a
because
0.5%.
the
Right.
basis for 17 will be an extra 0.5% on that, because their actual salary will be 0.5% higher than what you see. What you see in here is the amount of money they're gonna be paid next year, but their salary rolling on to the next year is
No,
actually
I mean, it
2%
should-
above this
I
year.
mean, while we're at it, I mean, it should be noted that it's a significant piece of chunk of change. It's only, it only lasts for half a year, But it's important for that half a year. It's important for fiscal year 16 that it wasn't a full percent. It's probably, I don't want to make that guess right now. I'm sure I'll get it wrong, but it's a substantial amount that it's in the hundreds of thousands, and it was very helpful. I mean, it along with other things that have happened, stimulus money, healthcare, whatever, it's another piece that contributed toward getting us through 7 years since the last override, and it won't be there next year. So I guess maybe that leads me into our last question, which is we can't do everything, and who is talking about the balance of the curriculum, particularly because we always notice the cut list starts with the arts and somewhere else. So,
Well, I'm going to say that's not a fair assessment before I turn it over to the superintendent. The cut list.
The cut list starts with the elementary school.
The cut list.
Organized that way.
The cut list, just like the budget, is developed collectively by the leadership team. And that's done with all of them in a room, meeting after meeting after meeting. So we don't say to the elementary schools, you develop yours, and the middle school, you develop yours. They do it collectively as a leadership team. And the cut list is different every year because the priorities are different every year. The common objective is that we're trying our best to make sure that the instructional process, the direct instruction to our children, is least affected by whatever we do. So it is not accurate that the arts or the music programs have been disproportionately affected. It is accurate to say that in certain years, those were the cuts that we had to make to ensure that the direct instructional process remained intact.
And to that point, we're very sensitive to it, and I explained to you at the elementary, there is nobody else to cut. There aren't any other people. And at the middle and high, you understand the core subjects are your English, your math, your science, your social studies, your world language. And then you have your electives. So you can see at the middle and high, those .2 cuts, which we could have a discussion. Who asked the question? You asked the question. You asked the question, Paul. Will you then just take the whole cut in art? So that we made a choice. We have subjects that are required, core subjects, and those .2 cuts, you can see they're just not in art and music. They're in technology, they're in family and consumer studies. So what those principals really did on the leadership team was to take those small cuts that add up to the 1.0 that could have been a math or an English teacher in every discipline. So it's just not math, it's just not music or art, it's technology, it's family and consumer, it's wood and auto, it's all of the electives. And they're really hard choices.
They are. So the cut list, which is where we started, is a collective discussion on your leadership teams, and I hope that when you have an opportunity to restore some piece of the curriculum, I gather that would be also a collective discussion.
And if I might, to your point, when I speak to the staff, I always tell them that in this community, the community supports the public schools. And your phrase, warrant committee, is very familiar to them. They understand the process with the finance subcommittee, the school committee, and I said, these people are vested in this town, in their public school budget. And I told them that we're only as good as our name. I look at Leroy Walker and Mike Zulis, and I remember when they were on your side of the table, and I said, we actually, you mentioned world language, we've gotten the message very strong, a strong message over the years from the warrant committee, and I said, we're only as good as our names. I said, and these people have become part of the process. I said, you send a message, I then send the message to the leadership team, and we convey our notes and tell them exactly what happens. But over the years, I remember sitting across from you, and you mentioned world language, you mentioned the arts, so when we make the decision, again, we make the decision, but we bring the input from the warrant committee back to the leadership team.
Well, I hope we continue to be part of the process. I know that the article we have in front of us, changing the duties of the town administrator, may affect our role somewhat. So we might have to talk to you again and find out what your position is on that.
And may I say one more thing? I also tell the teachers that in our kind of world, when you've identified funds in this process going forward, that our world is a teacher. So we say to them, I say to them, you know, that professional development money and that instructional money, that's gone. And that, it's sort of like feeling a consumer, that's not going to come back. I said, so every time the town can identify money, it's one person, and that's what they think in terms of. The warrant committee in this town, $50,000, $45,000 will put back one person back into the Milton Public Schools.
Well, we will do our best. And thank you for these thorough answers. This is really a useful document to have from year to year, because we were able to look at last year's questions and get some of our answers there too. So this is really great. I really appreciate your time putting this together, Glenn. And I don't know if does anybody have any other questions? Boy, this is it.
Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks, but.
You will.
Yes,
You will, absolutely. If we don't have to cancel for snow.
yes.
Yeah,
If you send questions, we'll send back the reply.
Okay.
I thank you very much. And just want to, Mike, Mary, thank you for coming. I'm sorry we ran out of chairs, but,
These were more comfortable.
Yes.
all right. Terrific.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor? Graham, thanks.
Thanks very much.